the most powerful frame that you can come from in sales is to be totally detached from the outcome. So the more you want the sale, the less power you have in that sales conversation, and the more likely you are to say something that puts that person off. That a sale is usually won or lost within the first 20 minutes of a sales call.
Matt Essam is an entrepreneur and specialist coach, helping creative agencies land consistent clients without selling out. He's an author, speaker, podcaster, and highly regarded voice in the coaching space.
Whenever I think about a coach or a mentor or a program, whatever it is, whenever I look at working with someone, I always want to make sure they've done exactly what I want to do. Or they're actually living the life that I want.
You've got, the things that you really care about that your heart wants, right? But then on this side, on the market, you've got what people will actually pay money for. And so you've constantly got to be aware of this in order to build this kind of aligned business that is moving you in the direction that you want to go and is actually helping you to get both of these things. On this side, you've still got to understand what people are saying that they are struggling with and that they're willing to spend their money on. What most people would refer to as a coach. You've got what I would call a mentor. And so a mentor is somebody who's like been there and done that and is kind of teaching you how to do it, but is also hopefully coaching you a little bit. And so the sweet spot for the person that I think we should look to learn from is somewhere in the middle here.
I've got a quick favour to ask you. Nearly 90% of people listening to this podcast right now don't follow or subscribe to us. And my goal is to get that down to 80%. So if you've ever liked an episode or a clip that we've put out, please could you click that follow or subscribe button. It helps us more than you know to bring more guests onto the podcast and put out better and better content for you. Thank you. Before we dive into this episode, I want to take a second to speak about our sponsor, Pith Stem, who we are thrilled to have on this journey with us. As someone who is always looking for ways to improve my healthy hustle, Pith Stem's DropTop desk stood out to me as the best full work from home solution on the market. The world of work from home is changing, and a laptop or screen perched on your lap or dining room table isn't enough anymore. It's imperative that we have a solution at home that matches our productivity station that we can have in our office. But of course, homes weren't made to be worked in, and not all of us want a dedicated study. That's why I'm so happy that Pith Stem created this perfect solution. They designed this desk with both the needs of the professional and their home in mind. It's perfect because it allows me to have a full productivity station that suits my needs and helps me get the most out of every minute that I spend at it, not only so I work comfortably, but that I actually enjoy it. And the best thing about DropTop, I can close and lock it at the end of the day to keep work and home separate. And it looks awesome on the wall. You can get your DropTop desk anywhere in the world from pithandstem.com or just Google DropTop and you'll find it pretty quickly.
So Matt, what is the biggest focus in your life right now?
Having the least amount of stress and the most amount of impact possible.
So why? Where did that come from?
I've realized that I'm a very sensitive person. I think my nervous system is very sensitive. I don't handle stress well. So if I'm stressed, then I'm not the best possible coach that I can be. I need to be in a space where I feel calm, I feel relaxed, and I can look at things objectively. Because I often deal with people that are very stressed, and it's a little bit like the idea you've heard the idea of the tuning forks, the sympathetic resonance, right? So if you get two tuning forks, the same frequency basically, and you bang this one, then this one will vibrate. So if you're in a stressed state when you're coaching people, then you can't get other people out of a stressed state. You have to be in a place of calm, you have to be objective, and you have to be able to guide people through their stress state.
Yeah. We were recently on a trip together, weren't we, in the Italian Alps, and on the first, there was like 50 entrepreneurs there. And on the first night there was talks going on. And I remember someone saying, it's really important to align your business with your personality type. Is that something that resonates with you? And is that something you've modeled your business on? This is your second business, right? Your second one that I'm aware of. And
it's probably about my fifth, but yeah.
We've all had the ones you don't want to talk about. Yeah. But is that important to you? The personality lines up with what you do now?
Yeah, I think more so recently. I don't think I've been aware of that so much until recently. I think I've always tried to fit my business into somebody else's business model, usually from whoever I'm learning from, right? And I think you have to trial and error stuff. Like you have to find what works for you. I don't think you can just go from day one, if you've never had a business before, and say, I'm going to build a business that aligns with my personality and my lifestyle. Like there are some fundamental things that you've got to learn, sales being one of them, to give you that privilege to then align your business to your lifestyle.
I completely agree. And I think that's something that I'm still learning. On the way here, I was listening to Alex Hormozy podcast it was a clip from Diary of a CEO, but with Hormozy on it. And he was talking about when someone starts their first business or they're very new to business, the first thing they're rewarded for is taking that massive risk from going from a job or education to business. So that risk is rewarded by that first few pounds or dollars you make. But literally the first thing you then need to unlearn is that massive change is super beneficial to your journey forward. You actually need to stick and do that one thing for a long time. And that resonates, or that comes to my mind when you're talking about, sticking to a business with your personality, because it's like, yeah, you can change towards things. And often when you see a mentor, you just want to do what they do because it works better. But actually just sticking to one thing and then taking things in is really beneficial. So from the other side of the pond, because I know you have a lot of mentors or you've done a lot of coaching. Sorry, you have been coached by a lot of great people, as a lot of coaches do and continue to do. How hard do you find it to stick to your lane when you're getting mentored by people that do so many different things in different ways? And how do you then pick just certain things to add to your business?
I mean, it's really difficult, right? And it's also difficult because it's not just about what I'm being coached or mentored on. It's also about what the market currently wants. So it's fine saying like, oh, I love X, Y, and Z, but if the market doesn't care about that, then no one's going to pay attention to you, right? And, Daniel Priestley talks about this idea of these kind of three overlapping things, which is like the product market fit, like the passion, and then like the problem that you can solve. So the way that I try and look at it is I try and use my last 10 years of experience and I look at what are the things that I've done. Like if you imagine I'm a coach with like a toolbox and I'm going to like fix a car, like what are the things that I see consistently? What are the tools that I always get out of my toolbox to use to fix that car? And how can I apply them to the problems that people are currently saying they have? Because if you can't meet people where they are, then they will never even pay attention to you in order for you to help them. So I think the skill in building a business that's aligned with your personality and the things that you love is also understanding that there's a market out there that is struggling with a bunch of stuff, right? So like, I know we're kind of doing a bit of drawing here, and I'm gonna draw some like terrible overlapping circles. But if on this side you've got the things that you really care about, that your heart wants, right? But then on this side, on the market, you've got what people will actually pay money for. And so you've constantly got to be aware of this in order to build this kind of aligned business that is moving you in the direction that you want to go and is actually helping you to get both of these things. On this side, you've still got to understand what people are saying that they are struggling with and that they're willing to spend their money on. Because if you help people with psychic healing and you know that this power you've got to like heal people's inner child really is the thing that moves the business, it moves the needle in their business, but they're sitting there saying they want more leads. If you go online and start talking about psychic healing, everyone's just going to ignore you. Well, like the majority of people will. There'll probably be some people that go, oh, I just get it and I resonate with it. But I wouldn't advise it, right? I'd figure out what people are actually talking about. You've got to meet people where they are.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good way of putting it, because, in our business, when we manage to get people exposure, whether they're on podcasts or LinkedIn or whatever they're doing, a lot of the time they'll get that exposure and then they'll see the comments and they'll see the messages and emails and it's asking for that certain or a slightly variant of what they actually do. And they'll go, I could set up a side thing there. And there's so many people, mentors and people much more intelligent than me, that would just say, just absolutely don't. Just do the one thing. But I think it's really clever, this sort of framework you're talking about, to go, you've got to make sure that what you're good at, the skills you can actually impart, match up with what people are going to pay for.
Yeah. And it doesn't even have to be, if you think about it this way, it's, if you imagine this side is kind of, this is like the thing that you actually deliver, right? And then on this side, this is like how people see you. So it doesn't actually matter what you do in here, as long as it's not too disjointed from people's perception or their expectations. So loads of people say right now they want more leads. Well, there is literally hundreds of ways to get more leads. I know Alex Hormozy talks about like the core four, but in my experience, you can get more leads by healing parts of your inner child, right? Because the actual process of getting leads is really about having conversations with people, identifying a problem that you can solve, and having the confidence to solve it. So it's actually really simple. But why do so many people struggle with it? Well, there's lots and lots of reasons. And without knowing someone's individual situation, it's very difficult to say what those reasons are. But if you start going out into the market and people's perception of you is you are the healing guru that heals people's inner child, and their number one pain right now, and their number one priority is to get more leads, they're just going to be like, you're going to be way down their hierarchy of needs. And I think this is what a lot of creatives struggle with, is they're so passionate about branding. They're so passionate about animation and design. That's where their heart is. And they know they can deliver a great product, but they haven't found a way to link it to what the market actually wants right now in this moment.
I really like that. And it's interesting actually to link that back to the first thing you said, which was that you've understood that you're actually more of a sensitive person, right? And you've learned that trait that you have. Anecdotally, like for me, in the first probably 18 months to 2 years of business, I noticed that all the entrepreneurs that I was around who were at higher levels than me, I was only really asking them questions about mindset. That was my biggest blocker. And so in the first like 6 months to a year, you're slower at building a business because you probably should be asking them about funnels and marketing and whatever. But I was like, but it's the mindset that intrigues me. You know, you don't talk to a millionaire who then goes, I'm not very good at stuff. They know they're not great at everything, but they've got a mindset where they're like, I can achieve, I can learn, I can grow. Funnily enough, then what happens is in the second or third year, you grow faster because you've got over those bits and you realize that anyone can learn funnels and whatever it is, but the mindset was always going to hold us back. So I think this is a very interesting place to start this conversation. What I'm interested in to sort of link this through is when you were going to school, you know, before you went to university, or maybe even university as well, at what point did you start to get really interested in the creative industry in whichever form you thought you would follow?
I did media studies at A-level, and I went to a very traditional school. Like, for anyone that's not from the UK, just think of Hogwarts, basically, like prefects with gowns and everything. So it was like
broomsticks.
Yeah, there was no. My friends outside of school used to just think it was crazy that like the only A-levels we could take were like maths and English and geography, and so they added that year that I became went into sixth form in my school, they added media studies. And I was like, this is so cool, because I'd always been into like photography and playing with cameras, and I was into like skateboarding and stuff when I was a kid, and I was always the guy that like filmed stuff. And so I did media studies, and I just loved it. Like I just took to it, you know, like a duck to water, and it was the only A-level that I got an A in, basically. And so from there, I kind of realized that I had an aptitude for film and photography and things like that. And so then I went on and I went out to New Zealand that we were just talking about. And so my cousin at the time had a film production company out there in the advertising space. And it was a small company. There was about 8 to 10 of them. And my uncle convinced him to basically employ me for 6 months as to get like a visa to go and work in New Zealand. And that was just an incredible experience. And I remember thinking at that time, wow, I can't believe that people get paid to do this. Like, it's just totally creative. And one day I'd be just being a runner and kind of like washing the dishes and just helping people with random stuff. And the next day I would be helping to direct a commercial. You know, it was just like, because it was such a small company, you were able to do those kind of things. And I just remember like that distinct feeling of there's something about this. There's like some kind of magic about this where I feel like I'm being a child, but I'm still earning money and I'm still like doing all this stuff that adults are supposed to do.
Was that your first experience of entrepreneurship? Your parents weren't entrepreneurs?
So my dad, I wouldn't say they were entrepreneurs. My dad was self-employed. He was a joiner and cabinet maker. My mum ran a travel agent, so she was director of a travel agency. My godfather was very entrepreneurial. So I grew up, I was very close to him, and he actually started the travel agency that my mum ended up taking over, but he also did other things, like he had garden centers, he started like a card warehouse, so very like traditional kind of entrepreneurship. I
always ask that similar question because, you know, I didn't know what an entrepreneur was until I probably left uni. But I don't necessarily think it's a good thing or a bad thing. I think the benefit you have, which is why probably I'm interested in mindset, is that if you had entrepreneurs around you when you're a bit younger, you maybe have more understanding of the possibilities. But actually, it can hold you back in a lot of ways, potentially, if the parents or uncles, whatever it is, don't show you the ways that are modern. They can show you like the ways they did it in the 80s and 90s, which is so different to how you would do it now. So I'm just interested to see how it sort of manifests.
I think what I was taught growing up was that you can do whatever you want. Like if you want to go and be a musician, you can do that. If you want to go and be an artist, you can do that. But there are certain things that if you do them will give you more opportunities in life. So if you do well at school, if you go to university, if you get a degree, you've kind of like covered a certain baseline, I guess, to say, well, if I try this thing, being a musician, it doesn't work out. Worst case scenario, I'm still going to have like a 9-to-5 job. And so that's kind of what my parents always taught me. And I think the reason why I felt so liberated coming out of school was because I kind of felt like I had checked all the boxes that society had asked for. And now I was being shown something which just felt fun and creative, and it felt like lots of possibility.
And so that was like a gap year, was it? You went to New Zealand. So then you came back, or you applied for university whilst you were there?
Yeah. So I actually applied for a different university, and then I decided before I went traveling, I went up to Leeds with a friend, and I saw that university and I was like, this is what I thought university was.
Cool.
And all the other ones I'd seen, I just wasn't really that excited about, and I was still kind of in two minds. So I decided to apply for Leeds, and I kind of made a bit of a fundamental mistake, which was because I hadn't really experienced the film industry and actually earning money. I'd just done A-level media studies. I applied for a degree that I believed was just going to give me more security. So I applied for computing and business, which I was interested in both. And I'd done business UCSE, and I'd done computing IT A-level. So it made sense, but it wasn't creative in any way. And that journey of going to university and having to do that for the first year really made me realize, like you talk about who are you as a person, that made me realize like I'm not a logical person. I'm very much a creative person, and this is killing me, basically.
Yeah. But then, so I'm interested in the journey from finishing university to then starting a business, because obviously you help a lot of creative agencies, and you work with people like Chris Doe who do a very similar thing in different ways, and that's incredible. But like, how would you get the confidence to go from I'm not logical, and maybe you didn't know at the time, but I'm slightly more introverted or sensitive, whatever you want to label it as, to then I'm going to start a business. I'm going to put myself on the line, take the risk, and face a lot of rejection. Like, what did that journey look like from end of uni to starting your agency?
It actually felt really easy for a few reasons. Number one, in my first year, I wanted to, because I was doing a very logical course and there was no real creativity in the computing and the business, I wanted to keep my photography going. So I started working for a company called Till Late, and they were one of the first companies that like go into nightclubs and they take photos of you as like a group of friends. They're not the ones that put it on the keychains. It just goes on a website and they make all their money from the traffic of the websites. But so I started working for them. I was also quite heavily into music still, so like played instruments, and then I was getting more into like music production and DJing. So I was kind of like filling my creative bucket with those things outside of the course. But because the photography and those kind of things typically tend to be very like self-led, it's like, you don't go as a photographer go and work for a corporate company and go around taking photos every day. It's like you can be a photographer for Till Late, but like you're self-employed basically. Like we'll give you the passes to get into the nightclubs, but it's up to you to earn money and to pitch people. And so I kind of had that experience in my first year. And then in my second year, when I switched courses, I switched to digital media. I was able to take quite a lot of the technical stuff from computing and apply it to digital media. So very quickly I'd already kind of had some experience building websites, but very quickly we started building websites, animations, things like that. I met a few people on my course, and I was a little bit better at the design, and a few of the other people were a little bit better at the sort of coding and the technical side. And so we started just kind of building websites whilst we were at uni. and we'd do stuff for like the medical society, because I had a lot of friends that were like doctors. We did things for small businesses. We did case studies. So I kind of already had that experience of basically just going out and getting work and making money out of things. And so although I got a job straight out of university, I had already done lots of kind of side projects, side hustles, I guess you'd call them these days, like leading up to actually graduating.
And like you say, getting your entrepreneurial, creative juices flowing from doing other things. So you actually really did blend the experience of being in New Zealand, working for your cousin or your uncle, and then the logical side of the university degree. And then you use the creativity from the photography and the stuff that you love doing, and then blend them together into something that people like you're doing here would spend money on, right?
Yeah.
Literally the exact same journey. So then what happened in that business? Just talk me through the story of that first agency.
So I was one of the first people to get offered a job before I graduated out of university, and it was for a big marketing and advertising agency in London. So when I told tutors and parents or whatever that I'd been offered that job, everyone was like, you have to take it, right? Because it was like a big name, and I knew that if I worked there, even for a year or two, that was like catapulting me forward into the creative industries. So I did that for about 18 months. Interestingly, as a front-end web developer. So that's kind of considered now to be a little bit more creative, but back then it wasn't particularly creative. Like, you were given a design by the designers. And the reason I did that was because I had that skill and that job came along. And so it was like, this is an amazing place to work. You could get a job here and you could probably change. Like, I had the experience of starting a course at uni and then transitioning to something else. So in my head, I was like, I'll start as a front-end web developer and then I'll try and transition into more creative things. That didn't happen. I lasted about 18 months and realized, like, I just hate working for someone else. I hate working in a big corporate agency. You know, they had worldwide offices, but I'd kind of kept my freelancing on the side. So basically what I did is I quit that job and I said, I'm just going to freelance full time. So that went from basically just trying to find enough work. And one of my friends who actually quit a similar job at the same time as me in London, he was starting a marquee hire company because that was his family business, and he needed a new website. So he was my first client literally the day after I quit my job. So it was like, how quickly can I build websites for people to start making the sort of money that I was making back then, basically.
Yeah.
So it was kind of, it felt like a quite an easy transition.
Yeah. And obviously, you know, whenever I think about a coach or a mentor or a program, whatever it is, whenever I look at working with someone, I always want to make sure they've done exactly what I want to do, or they're actually living the life that I want. Because someone could make, you know, millions and millions a month, but they're stuck at their desk. And I just don't want to do that. That's a performance business that I'm not as interested in as a lifestyle business. And so you now, looking back, help these people who are doing exactly what you did. So what are some of the things that you experienced in your 20s in that business that are the fundamental issues that still rear their head today with your clients?
Well, before we get into that, let me just address something that I think isn't talked about enough, which is the difference between coaching and mentoring. Because you just said, when I'm going to work with someone, I think, have they done the things that I want to do? Yeah, basically, right? So I think what not a lot of people realize is there's this kind of spectrum, and right up here, you've got a mentor. Sorry, let me start that again. Let me just redo that because that's not quite correct. Let me get another sheet of paper. We'll cut this bit out. It's fine.
We're not cutting anything out. This is raw. We love this.
Okay, let me try this again. So you've got this spectrum, basically. Right up here, you've got a teacher, right? This is somebody who is like purely telling you, these are the facts, this is what you do. They're trying to teach you a particular way of doing things. Yeah. Down here, you've got someone who's like a counselor or maybe like a therapist, or someone where you come to them and they say to you, how are you feeling today, Freddie? And you tell them your problems and they say, well, how does that make you feel? And what do you think about it? And it's very much just like question based.
Like facilitation.
Yeah. And so somewhere here, you've kind of got what most people would refer to as a coach, right? So a coach is a little bit further up than counseling or sort of therapy, because a coach might be a little bit more directional, right? And then up here, kind of closer to the teacher end, you've got what I would call a mentor. And so a mentor is somebody who's like been there and done that and is kind of teaching you how to do it, but is also hopefully coaching you a little bit. And so the sweet spot for the person that I think we should look to learn from is somewhere in the middle here. Because I know a lot of mentors that aren't very good at teaching, as they've done it themselves, but they're just not very good at teaching other people how to do it. They don't understand people's different learning styles. They don't understand any of those things. I also know a lot of mentors who aren't very good at coaching. Yeah. So they can tell you, this is how I did it, Freddie, but the thing that you want might be totally different. Yeah.
And I'll just add to that. I think this is a really good way of explaining it, that mentors won't always, they can't do a whole breadth of something, can they?
No.
So a mentor might be like, okay, I've used, paid Google ads to get to here. And like you say, it doesn't quite work for you. But then if you ask for a bit of coaching, they're like, yeah, well, it's the one thing I used, so I can't really help.
Yeah. Because coaching, what I've learned is coaching is a skill. And so when you said, like, I don't really want to be the person that says, I've done this with this agency in this way, I can help you do it. I think my core skill set is here, but some of the stuff that I talk about comes into this realm because I do have experience. But a lot of the people that I coach are creatives that are beyond anything that I ever achieved. Although I worked with big brands and big agencies and things like that, some of my clients are literally award-winning designers. They're at the top of their game creatively. And I know even if my journey was different and I spent a decade in the creative space, I would be nowhere near where they are. And that's where the power of coaching versus mentoring comes in, because they don't necessarily need to be taught like a particular skill set. They need coaching around how to trust their intuition more, how to be more confident in sales conversations, how to look at the things that they've already got in front of them and utilize them better, unpack them better, and communicate them better.
So I guess what I'll rephrase what I was talking about then, maybe so from this learning that I've just learned effectively, is that when you're looking at a mentor, you're looking at solving a specific problem. And I'm like, that person has done this and has the lifestyle that I want, and therefore I can take that and put it in my business. Whereas a coach is someone that I would use to go, okay, I need help for maybe a longer period of time with a wider span of something. I'm not quite sure what that span is. I just want to grow the business, or want to grow my mind, or open my mind up to something.
Yeah, and sometimes people just don't know why they're stuck.
True.
Like they're just stuck trying different things. And if you just go to a mentor and a mentor says, well, why don't you do this? And I'm like, well, I've kind of tried that. Well, have you tried it this way? And you get very much into the weeds, and like that's not even the problem. Whereas a good coach will zoom out and will see the cause of all of those symptoms, all of those things that are showing up like continuously that are keeping that person stuck.
I like that. And I think you're a great example of that, because you're openly coaching people that are doing incredible things, and your business did do incredible things, but not to that level. These are doing like millions and millions and millions.
Yeah, I'm not the guy that sits here and says, I built a 7-figure agency, here's the blueprint to building a 7-figure agency. Like, I understand that I'm a very good coach, and I have some experience and knowledge in a particular industry that puts me in a unique position to help those kind of people.
But you also never stop learning from the best. So you're always around these people that are just, there's just the knowledge base going around is super beneficial. So let me change the question then. So if I previously asked what were the things that you struggled with, if I take away the you part, what are the things, in fact, I don't want to ask that yet. What made you change from an agency model to a coaching model? And in my mind, I'm imagining it's something to do with the first thing we spoke about, which is lifestyle, understanding what you wanted out of business and life.
I just want to briefly interrupt this podcast so I can talk to you about Nutrition Kitchen, who have kindly sponsored this episode. As entrepreneurs who are looking to stay as healthy as possible, fueling ourselves with high quality food without breaking the bank or wasting time can be tough day to day. Nutrition Kitchen solves that issue by delivering incredible meals to your door, tailored to your diet, whether you're trying to lose weight, build muscle, or maintain balance. They change their menus all the time so you can choose from a variety of dishes and leave the monotony of meal prepping behind. Now, back to our guest.
There were two things. The first thing was I realized I was in the wrong lane. And what I mean by that is the same way I realized that first degree wasn't the thing for me, I realized that although I loved the creative industries, I'd kind of hit the limit of where I believed I could have the kind of impact that I was here to make. And there was a very pivotal moment for me in my life where I had built this kind of fully remote creative studio, I guess you would call it. We were predominantly building websites for people. We were doing a bit of social media. So this was back in about 2015. And so I just read the 4-Hour Workweek.
Nice.
And so my mission in life, if you had asked me that question that you asked me when we first started then, it would have been to travel the world and see as many places as that I could, right? And so I just bought into this idea of the kind of laptop lifestyle. I wanted this fully remote business. And bearing in mind, this was way before COVID. So this was quite a different landscape, right? Convincing people to work with you and do Skype calls and things like that was a different ball game, right? And so I'd kind of achieved this, and I was in Canada at the time. I was snowboarding in the Canadian Rockies, and I came down this slope, and I kind of stopped on the edge of this mountain, and I'm looking over this incredible view, the Canadian Rockies, and it's a Tuesday afternoon, the sun's shining, I'm bombing down, I pull out my phone, I take this photo of me sat on this, and I'm about to post it on Instagram, being like, probably something along the lines of, Tuesdays are fine, you just hate your job, something like that, right? And before I did it, I just had this real kind of burst of emotion, is the only way I can describe it, of resistance, of something about this isn't right. And so when I thought about it, it was really this idea that what I was portraying to the outside world and what was actually going on behind the scenes were two very different things. So I was living this incredible lifestyle, but I was deeply unfulfilled. And the work that I was doing just had got to the point where it felt monotonous, it felt boring. I really didn't feel like I was making an impact in people's lives or businesses. It was like this factory, and I was trying to find more offshore talent to get higher profit margins, to churn websites out faster, to create logos for people, to manage social media. And it was all just a little bit kind of, it felt pointless, right? And literally, as I got back to my hotel, my mum sent me a message and said, "Can you call me?" And so I called her, and I was like, "Oh, this isn't going to be good." And she tells me that a family friend basically has passed away really suddenly and unexpectedly. And I was in his early 40s, I think, right? So totally out of the blue. So I come back to the UK, and I start to have this like very different perspective on life. I start to have this perspective of, wow, like it can just be taken away from you in a second. And I remember watching this Steve Jobs commencement speech, and he said, every day I get up and I look at myself in the mirror and I ask myself, if today were the last day that I was going to be on planet Earth, would I want to do what I'm about to do today? And if the answer is no for too many days in a row, then I know something has to change. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, that is a resounding no. Not even just a little bit. It's like, no. But I felt really conflicted because I knew externally it looked like I was successful. And it also, all of the goals that I'd mapped out, I was achieving. I had this fully remote business, I was snowboarding, I was doing all these amazing things, but I just felt really empty. And so that was the kind of catalyst where I knew something had to change.
I didn't know that was a commencement speech by Steve Jobs, but that's literally what Antonia lives her life by.
Really?
Like every day she'll be like, do I want to do what I'm doing today? And it always conflicts me because I'm like, yeah, but we have to do some hard things.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just me who has to do the hard things. It's not, it's shared. But
yeah,
it's a really good way of looking at it because it's the consecutive days part that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
If it's just day after day of not doing great stuff, then why? And there's a few people that I know, and you're one of them, who do just cool stuff. Like you've just been in New Zealand for a month. You're moving around over the summer, and it's not necessarily the traveling part because not everyone can travel. I've got a Labrador, nightmare. People have got kids, whatever. But the point is that you have the freedom. You've built the freedom into your lifestyle, right? And you love what you do.
Yeah.
And that's opened more opportunities up for you, right? Like we said earlier, like we've just had Chris Doe on the podcast, and you are part of Chris Doe's sort of gang of coaches and
cult.
Cult. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. You don't wear the same hats he does, but you could if you wanted to.
We both have follically challenged.
Yeah. We spoke about it earlier, right? You can choose to be bold or not, whatever you want.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a different choice. So, okay. What I'm really interested in from all of this is that I don't know if this is true or not, but in my mind, I'm sort of starting to get this belief that everything is downhill from sales.
Sales has definitely been one of the skills that has allowed me to have this lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly. And there is people online who I'm not a massive fan of who just say your product doesn't have to be great or your service, just make the sales. Think about that later. And I understand that in building a business sense, but I want a product to be really good. And then everything works in the best way possible. But you've got a really cool sales framework that I want to go through, because I think people listening to this and hopefully watching this when we start getting the paper really flowing, they'll have heard of different frameworks. So with the closer framework from Hormozy, for example, which is really helpful. But when I listened to your video and I've heard you talk about it before, it makes more sense to me. Your one. His is very simple, very matter of fact. Sometimes that works for people, sometimes it doesn't as much. I'm really interested in where this came from. Where did you create this framework? And then hopefully we can go a little bit into it and see how it works for people watching.
So one of my first sales mentors was Daniel Priestley, who's a mutual friend of ours. And that was when I was making the transition from running an agency to wanting to do coaching. And I knew it was going to be difficult to sell coaching because I'd been on enough coaching courses. I knew coaches. I knew life coaching was not an easy thing to sell. So when I learned sales from Daniel, who, for anyone who doesn't know him, had a very successful startup when he was about 21, but since then has built multiple 7-figure businesses. He's a serial entrepreneur, and Dan is great at sales. He makes it feel very natural. He came from a sales background, like he worked in sales teams. So he's really been through the thick of it. And it made me realize that I wasn't having, or should I say, it made me realize that I was having transactional conversations rather than transformational conversations. And so there was this light bulb that went off for me when I was trying to make the transition. As I was training to be a coach, I realized that coaching and sales are very closely related. And so what I mean by that is a very classic coaching framework is something that we call, what's the acronym now? That's just totally gone out of my head.
It'll come to you.
Yeah. What is it? Grow. Yeah. So there's a very classic coaching framework called Grow, right? And it's one of the first frameworks that you get taught as a coach. And the acronym is just goals, reality, obstacles, way forward. And so that's pretty much sales. And so when I had that light bulb moment, I realized that sales didn't just have to be this transactional thing where someone comes to me and says, hey, Matt, we need a website. And I'm like, well, Freddie, how much money have you got? And you go, well, I've got this. And I think I could probably do something for that. And we go off in the background and make the magic work. It was whether this person works with me or not, I can have a real impact on just if it's their day today. Because most people don't even stop to think about, what are my goals? What do I really want? Most people aren't actually that in touch with their current reality. They've got stories about it, but what are the facts? Most people haven't actually identified what are the 2 or 3 opportunities right now that are going to move the needle the most in my business, and what out of those ones am I going to choose? So kind of going back to your original question, I think the framework is really a combination of probably almost £100,000 worth of investment in training coaches and mentors versus what I have actually seen work in the real world in the last 5 or 6 years of selling very kind of intangible soft services.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important way of looking at it. Do you think that sales, the way that you sell, should be linked to your personality and the way that you like to operate? I don't know the answer to this, but I feel like the way that I usually make sales, especially in the first year when there was no one helping us with sales, I would like to do it, and we'll go through your thing in a sec, but I would like to do the rapport for longer than perhaps I should. Because I feel like if I could build a rapport over like 10 minutes rather than 2 minutes in a half an hour call, it's going to make the end easier.
Yeah.
I don't think that's necessarily true, but that was my personality and I thought I could utilize it best. What's your opinion on the personality linked to how a sales call or sales framework should go?
I think it's like everything. I think there are layers. And I think there are some fundamental things about sales that you have to learn and you have to practice in a certain way. And it's going to feel uncomfortable and it's going to feel like it's not aligned with your personality. Once you have nailed that and you kind of feel a little bit like, oh, I'm bored of doing this slightly maybe robotic sales thing, then you can kind of add your flavor and your personality into it. It's like really any skill. Like if you're learning photography, when you first start learning, you've got to learn about aperture and shutter speed, and you've got to learn about the rule of thirds and all of these things and use them well. Once you've mastered that, then you can start getting creative with stuff. So the mistake I see a lot of people making is they go, oh, I don't really want to ask that question, or I don't want to do it this way because it doesn't feel like me. I'm like, yeah, but you are doing you, and you're currently not getting the results that you want. So maybe we should try something else.
Yeah. I always use this example in my life. I don't know if on the podcast that much, but my last boss before I quit and started a business, I put a lot of success down to him because he just opened my mind up as a 25, 26-year-old into so many things. And one of the things that sticks in my mind is just something he taught me, which is just the Dunning-Kruger effect, which works in so many ways. And it's effectively when you learn something new and your confidence rises really high, but alongside it, incompetence. You get to the top and you realize you know enough to then look over the brow of the hill and see the valley of everything else you don't know. And I feel like that's where most people get stuck in sales, where they're like, I've made a few sales, that was easy. And then someone watches it back and goes, I don't know how you made those sales, because you didn't follow anything.
Luck.
It was luck, exactly. Yeah. So let's have a look at your framework.
Yeah,
I've got it here just because I think it's unfair just to put it in front of you.
Just to make me draw it.
Yeah, but I'm really interested in how this works and the psychology behind it.
Yeah. So I think we're good. Yeah. I think before we get into the framework, there are a few principles that I think are really important to mention about sales before we actually talk about the kind of strategic point of view. The first one is that the most powerful frame that you can come from in sales is to be totally detached from the outcome. So the more you want the sale, the less power you have in that sales conversation, and the more likely you are to say something that puts that person off. So one of the hardest things to do, especially when maybe revenues are low or it's like getting a little bit tight for a cash month, one of the hardest things to do is enter a sales conversation, be totally objective and be totally detached from the outcome.
So whoever controls the frame controls the conversation.
Well, that's like the frame of the sale. But what I mean is like literally, let's say I know you're interested in coaching. If I'm attached to you working with me as a coach, I can't have the same conversation I can have with you as if I'm totally detached from that.
Yeah.
So like when people come into this, one of the first things they've got to do is they've got to try and be objective and see this framework as more of a like consultancy process rather than a way to make a sale.
I guess that helps with the qualification as well, because you don't seem desperate. It probably works more in your favor, and you're going to more objectively qualify them to become a client.
Yeah, and you'll say things to people that you won't say if you're worried about upsetting them or putting them off working with you. And often those things are the things that end up making them want to work with you.
Like you're not quite a 100% fit for us, and then they really want to become a fit for you.
Just being honest with people. Like in sales, some of the biggest challenges around sales is that people are afraid to be honest. They're afraid to say something that they believe is true because they're more concerned about making the sale and that person's perception of me as a seller than they are about actually serving that person.
So is there anything you would do or advise to someone that they do before they get on a sales call?
I would advise them to really step into a feeling of abundance. And
I don't need this.
Yeah, and look at all of the opportunities that you have. And if you don't have enough opportunities, that's a different problem. Right? It's not a sales problem. So really look at like the clients that you've helped, maybe look at some testimonials, maybe look at anybody else you're talking to, so any other deals you have in the pipeline, and really like step into this idea that opportunity is everywhere. Like Daniel Priestley taught me that. Opportunity is everywhere. Somebody somewhere today woke up with exactly what you need. And it's out there. So if it isn't this deal, it's going to be another one. And if you can come from a place of abundance and what Daniel Priestley calls with or without you energy, it totally transforms this framework. And I think it's really important to say, because a framework is just a framework at the end of the day. And if you come and you use this framework and you are nervous and you're really attached to the outcome and you're rushing through it because you're trying to push this person to do something, it won't work.
This is just one step or one asset that helps you in the whole process, right? Like some people are going to scramble to this framework, but they haven't got calls being booked in. It's the same principle, right? This is only going to help you if you're in the right frame to utilize it.
Yeah, 100%. So the first thing is kind of what we call the setup, right? And this is actually one of the most important parts of a sales conversation. I believe, from having thousands of conversations, that a sale is usually won or lost within the first 20 minutes of a sales call. So there's a couple of things that are important in the setup. We talk about rapport, and rapport is really this idea that we are finding something in common with someone. People think rapport is about like, oh, how's your day going and how are you and blah, 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 blah. If you think about when you're on holiday and you're in a totally foreign country, if you meet someone who supports the same football team as you, or even better, is like from a town where you grew up, instantly you have that rapport with them and they feel like part of your tribe. And it's a biological thing, right? We look for people that have similarities because we feel safer. So rapport, the first thing I'm doing in the first kind of 30 seconds to a minute, and ideally this is before I jump on the call, like I've done a bit of research around them and I know something I could bring up that we have in common. I'm talking about, even if it's just a country I've lived in that they currently live in, even if it's something like they've got kids and I've got kids, I'm just trying to find something that draws us together.
I guess that would even work for, like, you know, when you go on a sales call and you know the sales, whatever it is, person, closer, is busy and they don't know anything about your business. And you always feel, I always feel a bit standoffish, like you don't know anything about me.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll get to this in the kind of two islands. But rapport, people confuse rapport for small talk.
Okay. That's probably what I did in the first year.
Yeah, so we think we've got to make small talk with someone before we then start talking about business. I think it's quite an English thing.
Yeah.
But this can really derail a conversation. So people get into small talk, and then what happens is, if we don't time this properly, the prospect often feels like they have to then take control of the conversation to bring it to what we actually want to talk about today. And so they then get down this rabbit hole and they say, oh, and that reminds me, and that's why I'm here, and blah, blah, blah. And they're off, and you've totally lost control of that conversation. So it's really important that we make sure we're building rapport and we're not getting into small talk. And usually I would say to people, you said, like, I'd rather this last longer. But I think the reason you want it to last longer is maybe because the way that you're currently building rapport isn't as effective as it could be.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you could get rapport with someone in a minute, why would you want that rapport section to last any longer than that, right? So 2 to 3 minutes max. We don't want to take more than that.
So something that we always find that works now in our second or third year business is just like that really quick minute or two, and then be like, we've only got 30 minutes. Do you mind if we just crack on? And they always go, yes, please.
Yeah.
Like they don't want to small talk as much as we do.
So this is where the pre-frame comes in, right?
Okay.
So the pre-frame, you can call it a pre-frame or a frame, but it's basically the lens in which you view things. So this is actually originally from NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, something I learned as a coach. So a pre-frame is basically letting people know or controlling how people are viewing a conversation. And there's a few things. One of them you just mentioned here. And the first one is a time constraint. So it's really important that you let somebody know how long this conversation is going to be, and you check when they need to finish. Because we've all had sales conversations where we feel like the deal is just about to close and they're like, oh, sorry, I've got to jump off now. I've got another meeting. And you're like, damn it, right? So it's really important to establish time, but it's also really important to establish structure. So how is the call going to go? And so you alluded to something I said in my video, which is whoever controls the frame controls the conversation, right? So if I tell you, this is how long this podcast is going to be, this is how we're going to structure it, these are the kind of questions I'm going to ask you, you're in control of that conversation, right? And so most people miss this part in a sales conversation. And so it feels like they're being interviewed rather than them interviewing the prospect. And so this pre-frame is really, really important. And there's a few other things that we can do, but the biggest ones are structure, time, and then the final one, right, it's getting a bit scrappy on here, but that says intention, right? So what is the intention of this call? And this is where you can really disarm people and you can really get people on your side. Because most people, what do they think the intention of a sales call is?
To someone to steal their money.
Yeah, or to sell me something.
Yeah, of course.
Right? So I'm coming on the call. So automatically, if I think that you're here trying to get me to buy something, then my defense is already up. So I'm not going to open, when we get into the rest of the framework, if we have time, I'm not going to open up to these questions because I think you're trying to ask me something to manipulate me.
Yeah.
So it's really important. I believe the intention of every sales conversation should be clarity. Clarity, whether there is an opportunity and whether we would be a good person to work with in order to help you with that opportunity.
I'm glad you say that. We call our calls clarity calls.
Clarity
to give
calls.
you clarity.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
That's all it's for, right? So this is not, so if today we figure out that this is not a good fit, that's totally cool.
But then you can give them information to say, this here's some helpful free stuff, and if you do this, you come back and you will be a good fit.
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity, which again is a phrase that I've stolen from your video.
Yeah, but it's also, I think this point is really important. It's also to make people feel relaxed. Because if they know you're not trying to get me to say yes, you might get me to say no. You might decide that this isn't a good fit. Then it takes the pressure out of the call.
And that's really interesting, because I think most people, myself included previously, would think that rapport is trying to get them to relax. And actually relaxing, like you said, is probably the second part.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And then the final part on the setup is just, I've kind of like done a little stick man here in a power pose, but I call this authority. And what I really mean by this is I want to know in your mind, if you're the prospect and I'm the person having the sales conversation, how much authority I have.
Okay.
So it's really helpful for me, because if you've jumped on this call and 2 minutes ago you didn't know who I was, this is going to be a difficult conversation. I don't really want to be having this conversation. And there is something that comes before this, like you said, a clarity call, which is someone can fill out a form and maybe qualify themselves, and you can ask some of these questions, or you can jump on a shorter call before, and this is a longer sales call. So that's kind of where this fits in the whole process. But I want to get like, why do they think I am the person to be having this conversation with today? How well do they know me? What do they know about me? So an example of how we might go through this, obviously rapport is fairly self-explanatory. I then might say, Freddie, like, great to connect with you today. So just so you know, we've got a maximum of 60 minutes. I've got a hard finish. I've got my next call at this time. Is that okay with you? Yeah, great. So because we've got this time constraint, I find having this structure for these conversations really helps. First, we're going to talk about where you are now, where you want to be, what you feel is standing in the way. Then I'm going to figure out if there's anything I can do to help. And if there is, then I'll tell you what the next steps are. And if there's not, then I won't. And so my intention of today's call is simply to get us clarity.
Makes way more sense.
Yeah. And so then I'll just say, before we dive in, I'm just curious, why did you decide to jump on this call with me today? So now I'm kind of getting you to explain what you know about me, why you think it's beneficial to you. And so notice, I'm not saying I'm so great, I've done this, I've done that, I've helped all these companies. I'm getting you to tell me. And if I don't think that this is like sufficient enough, I might dig into it a little bit. So if I'm feeling really confident in a sales call, I might just say, well, that's interesting. Like, there's loads of people that could do that. So why have you chosen to jump on today with me? And just kind of getting them to reinforce like their decision to spend that hour talking to me, right?
And you've got so much control in that conversation if you do that.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just go, great, and move on because you're nervous,
Yeah.
it feels like they're in control. They've won that little part.
And also think about how that frames you. It's kind of saying, okay, cool. Like, that's great, but what else? Like, why else is this thing important to you? Why else does this thing matter, right? And it's like, I'm not attached to getting you to do something. I'm trying to understand why you think this is so important, which is totally different.
Yeah, exactly. So that's all the setup.
Yeah.
Which is probably the part people, well, I was going to say struggle with the most, but there's actually 3 more parts they're probably going to struggle with as well.
Yeah. So we can, what we can do just based on time is we can kind of talk about like the high level of these 3 parts, if that works.
Yeah, of course.
Without kind of going into
You might want to use different bits of paper, right? So maybe it's a bit bigger.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So just so that kind of people see the full framework. So we've got the setup, then we've got the discovery phase, and then we've got the diagnose phase here, and then I'll just do green, and then we've got propose. So discover, diagnose, propose. It's quite, I've kind of made it like that just to make it easier to remember. Right, so that's kind of how this works. And the idea of this framework, we'll put a link to the actual PDF below so people can get it, is that you're kind of going from top to bottom, and then you're working your way from left to right. Right, so you go down this way, down this way, down this way, down this way.
Perfect.
Top to bottom, left to right. So I kind of like to think about this in in these three sections. So we'll just give like a high level overview so people can see these a bit more clearly. So obviously we've got the setup, but I kind of like to think about these in three distinct sections. So if we imagine, like, I'll just put an S here. This is the setup that we've just been through. And I'm definitely not going to be able to make these equal three parts. So that's not too bad. So we've got the setup. Then we've got discover. In the discover phase, I am literally trying to figure out where are they now, where are they trying to get to, and what is standing in their way. And that's like a very basic sales concept and framework. The people that the point where most people get this wrong is they talk about where people are now, they talk about where they're trying to get to, they talk about what's standing in the way, but they stay very surface. So you might, let's say, you're talking about content marketing on LinkedIn, and you say, so Matt, what are you trying to achieve? Well, I want more engagement on LinkedIn. And so you're like, okay, more engagement. Okay, what else? Well, I really want to grow my following. Okay, grow following. And they list all this stuff, and then they just stop there. So like, oh, well, what they're trying to get is more engagement, more of a following, build their profile. Great. Cool. What's stopping you? Oh, I don't know what content to post, blah, blah. And we've just had like a very surface level conversation. The idea in Discover is that we go deep. So when you list out all the things you want, such as more engagement, more followers, my next question should be why? What's that going to get you?
Yeah.
And it might always come back to more money or whatever. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get an idea of a perfect world in their mind. What does life look like? Because if I don't know that, then I can't really decide whether what I'm going to do is even going to help them to get there. So for example, you've said this to me before. When you ask people why, they say, oh, I want more leads. And you kind of know that, right, really your whole process isn't just about getting people more leads, right? It's about building authority. It's about building trust at scale, all of these things. So it's really important we dig down into that. What is that end goal? And getting people to like visualize that in their mind. How is life better? If you have all these things, tell me how your life is better right now. Oh, well, I get to spend more time with my kids because I know that like my inbox is filled of people asking to work with me, or I know that I'm going to get invited on podcasts and, that's going to create more opportunities. Okay, why is that important? Why does that make you feel good? Why are podcasts important? And just keep asking people, right? Until you really get down to this thing that you can see excites them and makes sense in your mind of like, oh yeah, life would be exponentially better.
Yeah.
Now we've got a gap. Whereas before we just had, I want more content engagement, I want some more followers, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, there's no real gap there. There's like, it's very small. We're having like a surface level conversation, right? Then on the flip side, okay, what's stopping you getting there? I don't know what to post, blah, blah, blah. Okay, what kind of impact does that have on you? Oh, well, I spend hours. How long do you spend? How does that feel for you? What's the cost of this thing not changing? And so the discover phase is really about trying to get an understanding of how big that gap is. Because if that gap's small, the rest of the conversation is going to be really hard. If you say, I want more engagement on LinkedIn, I want a few more followers, etc., and you say, yeah, great, that's going to cost you 10 grand. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Right? It's very surface. But if you say, well, what I really want is I want to become an authority in my space. I want to get more opportunities. I want to get invited to do TED Talks. I want to get invited on podcasts. Okay, well, what would that, if you could have all those things, what would that mean for you? Oh, I think I could grow my business exponentially. How much by? An extra 100,000, an extra million, like. So
it's the impact.
Yeah.
Is actually one of the main parts of the first half of this entire conversation. Yeah. Getting them to sell it to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I usually won't go past this. So this whole framework, it's fine to just cut a conversation here.
Oh, okay.
So if I don't think that gap is big enough, then I'll just say, okay, great. I don't think we can help. Because it sounds to me like what you really want is you just want you want a few more likes on LinkedIn. You want to grow. That's not really what we do.
Yeah.
I don't think
I've spoken to you about it before to you, like people who just want leads. And I've put people in touch with like paid ads agencies before because they just I want 10,000 leads next week.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Here's the number of someone who's going to do that if you spend $15,000 with them on paid ads.
Yeah.
Like, different
exactly.
way of it. Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
So I'm happy to kind of stop the conversation there, right? Any questions on that bit or do you want to move on?
No, I like that bit. That makes sense to me.
Okay, cool. Let's talk a little bit about Diagnose. I'm not going to use yellow actually, because I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. So let me use red again. Actually, I'll use black and then I'll use green.
So creative.
So this part's really important. If you are talking to a prospect where you believe the gap is big enough, i.e. where they are now, where they're trying to get to, and the impact of not reaching that gap is big enough for you to feel like you want to invest time, money, and energy helping this person, the next part is you're going to diagnose why you think that they have this gap, basically. And so I'll literally just say at the end of this, after we've gone through all of this, right, when I move into diagnose, what I want to do is I want to summarize basically what I've heard here. Because if I start saying, well, I think you need to do this and do this and do this, but that person doesn't feel like I understand the problems, then they're going to be less receptive. So all I will do is literally, and people really struggle with this because it's the whole personality thing. Oh, it's not really me. That feels a bit weird. Doesn't matter. There's a lot of research to suggest when you repeat stuff back to people in their words, they feel seen and heard. So all I'm going to do on the diagnose phase is I'm just going to say, so Freddie, what I've heard so far is that right now you've got da-da-da-da-da-da, and where you really want to be is here, because if you had those things that would allow you to do da-da-da-da-da, and what you feel the real challenge is X, Y, and Z. And the cost of not fixing that challenge is da-da-da. Have I heard that right? And that shouldn't take more than 5 minutes just to relay about it to them. And most of the time, what will happen is people will hear what they've just said to you back to themselves and they'll go, wow, yeah, that is right. And they'll have that moment where they realize the real impact and the real gap of where they are because they've just heard their life and their situation replayed back to them objectively.
In their words.
Yeah, in their words.
Cool, okay.
So that's really powerful. And then the next question is super easy. It's like, would you like to hear some ideas about how we might be able to bridge that gap?
And they're going to obviously say yes. So you've got a yes.
Most of the time.
You're collecting yeses.
Yeah. So it's like, cool. Okay, great. So let me share some things with you. And what you're going to do is you're just going to maybe share some case studies, some examples of, we worked with Jeff, and Jeff was in a really similar position to you, and he was struggling with these things, and he really wanted this, and blah, blah, blah. And here's what we did with Jeff. So the first thing we did is we looked at his positioning. Then we did this, then we did this, then we did this. And now Jeff has got X amount of followers. He's getting blah, 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 blah. Does that resonate? Yeah, great. Okay, cool. So if we did those things, do you think that you could achieve what Jeff achieved?
That's a cool piece. You literally give them a testimonial on the call effectively.
I mean, obviously, if you have a relevant testimonial,
yeah.
If not, you can use other examples of other brands, Nike do this and blah, 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 blah. Or you could just say, look, this is what I think from my last 3 or 4 years of, I think first of all, we need to look at this, then we need to look, right? So you're prescribing what you think is right. But then the important thing is you have to say to them, if we did these things, do you feel that would help you to achieve your goals? Because if they don't, and if there's something in that list of prescription that they don't agree with, then it doesn't matter what the actual logistics are, how much it costs, any of that stuff, they're not going to move forward.
And is this where we get to the soft close? This is a soft ask here, right? Where you're moving them forwards very gently.
Yeah. So I would say all those things and say, here's what I think you should do. Do you think that would get you those things? And I won't move forward until they say yes. Because sometimes people say, yeah, but do you know what? Our business isn't quite like that and blah, 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 blah. Okay, cool. Tell me more about that. So what I'm actually doing is I'm eliciting objections right now. That's why it's called a soft close. Because I'm actually getting objections from people. Why don't you think that would work for you? What's different about Jeff? Or what out of these things have I listed that you think, okay, let's dig into that. And then we can have a conversation about it. So I won't move to the propose until I've got a green tick, them going, yeah, do you know what, actually, Matt, if we did those things and we did it this way instead of that way, I'm pretty confident I could get my goal. Okay, great. Would you like some help with that?
Okay, would you like some help with that? And then they're going to say yes, or I'd like to at least talk about what's going to happen next.
Yeah. And so then that's when we move on to the final section, which is propose. Right? Now I'm actually going to talk about the logistics of what does that look like.
Yeah.
So then you start to go into the details of your product. Okay, cool. And you might have a little presentation. So look, the first week we do this, and then we gather info, and then blah, 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 blah. Then we do this, then we do this, then we do this. This is roughly how much it costs. This is what the process is going to look like. How does that sound?
Okay, so then how do you leave that part there? Because that's a bit that I think most people listening to this will struggle with, where right at the end, they're like, how does it sound? They go, yeah, great. now what? Like,
Cool.
Do you want to send me some more stuff or?
Okay, so let's play that through, right? So yeah, great. Like, sounds good. Great. So look, Freddie, most people are in one of three places right now. They're either green, they're ready to move forward, sign on the dotted line, get things moving. They're amber, they've got a few concerns or questions, or they're red, doesn't feel like a good fit. Where are you right now?
I'm amber.
Okay, great. So I'm just curious, why are you not red?
I think it could work for me, but I think the investment's quite high.
Okay. So apart from the investment, would there be anything else that would stop you from being a green?
I'm not sure if it's the right fit for me. I want to speak to some of your clients.
Okay, so you want to hear some more testimonials. So now what's happening, right, is we're getting the list of concerns and objections. So that's it on the thing. So it's specifics, make the offer, where are you, traffic light. Now what I'm eliciting is the real objections. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those objections, I'm going to list them out, and I'm going to say, great, if there was a way to help with these concerns, or if there were things that we could do around these things, would there be anything else that would stop you from being a green?
And then close on the call.
Well, then they'll say like, no, it's green. Okay, great. Now I'm actually handling the real objections.
Yeah.
Around price, around I need to speak to this person, but can we talk about that? Great.
Yeah.
Now the cool thing about, let's just loop back to this for a second. I know we're tight on time, but let's just loop back to the setup. In the setup, if you want to close more deals on calls, what you need to say in the setup is, all I ask is that by the end of today's call, we make a decision whether we're going to move forwards or not. If it's a yes, then we'll get our onboarding call set up and we'll dot the I's and cross the T's. If it's a no, totally cool, no hard feelings. Are you okay with that?
Cool. Okay. So then by the end, if they're a red, they say no. Mm-hmm. If they're an amber, you hopefully got them to green, or red if it has to go. Yep. If they're a green, they don't have to pay right there, right then. You at least set up the next call.
Yeah. Set up the onboarding call, get the T's and C's, like you get that momentum.
24 hours later.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. And so that's the next steps. Outline the steps. Here's what happens. Ideally, I'm a big advocate of taking a payment on a call, but I understand that there's like a lot of there's complex sales that involve multiple stakeholders. And when you're talking about multiple 5-6 figure deals, that doesn't always happen. But what I want to do is by the end of that, if they're a green, I want to get to them. They're either going to be a green or they're going to be a red. I don't want amber because amber's just waste time. And then you let them go off into the distance. They get distracted by life and everything else going on, and they forget. And then you're there chasing them. Hey, did you speak to so and so? Or hey, did you say like? You don't want to be in that. You don't want to be in that place. I'd rather I take someone as a no for now, than have them as an amber.
I love that. I think that's so helpful for so many people listening because we actually had a guy on maybe a year or a half ago, Spencer Lodge, and we spoke about sales, and he was very much like, this is how we do sales, but it's such a different way. And one of the things that he said, which aligns with what you're saying, is that everyone thinks they're good at sales. Everyone. Yeah. Because you don't want to be bad. It's embarrassing if you've got a business to be like, yeah, I'm bad at sales. Yeah. Because then it fundamentally, like we said earlier, everything's downhill from sales. So you're probably not doing that well if you're bad at sales. So not saying that everyone listening to this is terrible, but everyone can get better at sales, or at least maybe their team can. I think this is super, super valuable. And we'll stick this link to your video and the framework, which I think is in your video anyway, in the description below this video. Yeah. And if anyone wants to go and talk to Matt, where can they find you?
LinkedIn, probably. Send me a DM, say you listen to this podcast, and if you want to chat. And the one thing I'll just say finally about the framework is the reason I designed it is because it's not about scripts. It's about principles, and it's like a checkbox. So once you've got rapport because you found something in common, you can check that box and you can move on to the next thing. Once you've done the pre-frame, here are the things I say in the pre-frame, check that box, move on to the next thing. With the soft close, everything we just went through, you don't need to rush it. You don't need to try and push prospects. You just say, I'm on this box right now. And if you're not happy with it, you're not happy with their response, just stay on that box. Mm-hmm.
And like you say in your video, actually, you can literally print this out and put it as a poster behind your webcam. Yeah. And just literally look through it and go, tick, done, move on, next, or I'm stuck. And I guess you can annotate it yourself. Yeah. A lot of the stuff in this podcast, if you're watching it on YouTube, Matt's added, which is not on the framework. So you can annotate it yourself with extra things, with reminders and extra things that will try and help you push someone forward. Yeah. How much more likely do you think someone is to make a sale if they follow a framework versus just freeballing it?
Well, I literally get people on a weekly basis sending me messages on LinkedIn saying, I just used your framework to close like a 20 grand, 30 grand deal or whatever. Like I've already paid for X, Y, and Z. And I've also had people like want to work with me coaching because they're like, well, I just used all your free stuff to generate this much money. So what would it be like if I actually worked with you?
It's literally perfect. Give away the farm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Freddie.
If you like these episodes, feel free to subscribe to our Healthy Hustle newsletter below, where you'll get behind the scenes information from our guests, as well as from the studio operator who helps us create these cinematic episodes. It's also full of business advice and tips, and it will help you join the community of healthy entrepreneurs.